I was so upset. I thought to myself, I am not getting the title of a director because I'm a female and this male had the role as a director level, but like I'm not seen as like the same level as him.
Hey, welcome to the show. I'm your host, Andrew Kaplan, and this is a show where I get to chat with my SaaS heroes, people who work on or around cross-functional growth teams, to hear about their career journeys and double-click on some of the toughest moments that almost derailed them along the way. My guest today is incredible. It is Meredith Rosenbloom. She is the VP of Growth Marketing at Zola, and her career journey has included stops at Parsley Health as VP of Growth Marketing, at Grubhub as Senior Director of Growth Marketing, at Masterclass, at Edelman before that. She also coaches and consults on the side. My conversation with Meredith covered some of the major challenges that she's encountered in her journey, specifically getting asked to take on a new role with added ownership and accountability without a promotion, getting feedback about the inflection of her voice, and how she has navigated the challenges of being a new parent returning to work. We also spent equal time exploring her favorite tactics, rituals, and tools that she leans on to work through these today. We covered it all. I think you're going to love this episode. Let's go ahead and jump right in with Meredith.
There's a bunch of hard moments in my career. And, there's also moments more recent, right, that are difficult. And I know now as I look back that I've been able to overcome them all. And in the moment, they were so hard. And it felt just like the world was ending. But I know that with time and with mentorship, things do get better and there's a learning from it. And so I like to be able to tell my story to help other people know that like we all have gone through these tough experiences before and the grass actually is greener on the other side.
I love that perspective. So where does your story start? I want to contextualize your career journey before we just jump into the meat of it. Can you tell us like where are you from and what was your childhood like?
Yeah. So I grew up in the northern suburbs of Chicago, white picket fences, very like on the outside, idyllic childhood, two siblings, great education. My parents got divorced at a young age and money was tight. And my mom worked many, many jobs to make ends meet while I, helped to take care of my younger brother. And so from a very young age, I learned what hardworking was and how important money was to support a family. And I really know that has shaped my drive today.
If we were to talk to someone who you went to high school with, how would they describe you?
Yeah, definitely type A, but very hardworking and very compassionate. I spent so much time in high school volunteering with Special Olympics and was the captain of like the rowing team. And so for me, it was always about being a leader and always about helping others. And I was spent like every day after school, every weekend, either like, leading a team or helping others through like Special Olympics.
That's amazing. Where does that come from? Was that just in you or was that encouraged by your family or does it come from somewhere else?
Yeah, definitely encouraged. My mother really wanted us to do a lot. She did a lot, right? As I talked about being a single parent, she went back to school while being a single parent and while starting her own company, right? So she was doing a ton and she wanted us to have a very good life. And I think she knew that the more we experienced, the more we could explore at a young age who we were and what we wanted in our future. So I think it was definitely a large part her. And then I think another part of it is like who you're born as. I naturally, between my older sister and younger brother, am the more nurturing one. Sorry if you guys hear this. I do believe that to be true. And so I think that just has been pulled through in all aspects of my life, this like nurturing piece.
And if we were to have met you in high school or around that age and we asked that version of you what they thought you would grow up and do for work, what do you think they would answer? What did you think at that time?
I wish I could say sitting at a desk all day and analyzing numbers, but that is not the case. I would say like my sister was so lucky. She's a doctor, right? That path is so clear. If you're a lawyer, it's hard, but like the path is clear. There's not, at least when I was growing up, this path to be like, okay, you're going to go be a growth marketer. My dad was a trader at like the board of trade. I didn't have like a vision, to be very honest with you, of like what my future was going to be. I knew I wanted to go to college, but after that, like I knew that I needed to explore more of what I wanted. I think like maybe working for a nonprofit I probably thought about at some point, like doing the Peace Corps, which I never did, but probably more of this like idyllic life than what I currently do, to be honest.
And what did you major in school?
Yeah, so I majored in finance and marketing. I went to Georgetown, and my family was mortified that I chose to go into the marketing route versus the finance route.
Oh, of course. Yeah. And so you graduate from school, marketing major, well, part marketing major. Did you get like, tell me your first couple steps from that version of you? You're in college, you're studying this stuff. How did you get into this world? What were the first few steps?
Yeah, I mean, the world I'm in now is not the world I began my career in. So I was lucky enough to go to a college that had a lot of opportunities around it, right? Georgetown's in Washington, D.C. And so I was able to have internships every single semester. So when I was in college, talking about experiences, and my mother always encouraged us to do a lot. I did things like interned for at the Mexican embassy. The ambassador came to a class, and afterwards I said, I was like, you're so interesting. Like, are there any jobs? And so I got to intern there for a semester. Sorry to bring up politics, but I also interned with the Hillary Clinton campaign one semester. So like the embassy, politics, and then I went into sports marketing. So I worked at a sports marketing agency another semester. And then I worked at like UBC, like a bank, another semester. So I did it all. And this goes back to in high school, like what did I want to be? I didn't know. So I just did a ton. I knew for me, the banking was out for me. I tried it. And I loved the sports. I loved working at the sports agency. I didn't think about money at the time, right? Like I just wanted a job. And so once again, my family was like, go into banking. And I'm like, no, like I love sports. So I actually began my career on like the sports marketing sponsorship side before, when we can talk about it, before like 5 years, 6 years later, going into the growth side of things.
That's super cool. And so, as a side note, you have a Jewish last name. Are you Jewish?
Yeah, part Jewish. My dad's Jewish.
So I'm Jewish as well. I ask because it's so interesting. So you're at Georgetown, you get to meet all these impressive people, and you had chutzpah, the courage to ask to see if there were opportunities, and there were. And so from a young age, you start advocating for yourself. These opportunities start coming your way. You start creating your own luck. I think that's amazing for what it's worth.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and I think like when I talk to, people in my neighborhood, right? I now like live in the suburbs. I'm now a parent, right? A young girl who babysits for me and she's starting high school. I'm like, do as much as you can. Like, yeah, she doesn't like running, but I'm like, yeah, join the track team. Like, get outside your comfort zone.
And so how do you go from sports to PLG? Just tell us a little bit about bridging the gap there.
Yeah, I think so I was in a marketing agency for 5 years where I never even thought about PLG. I really never even thought about like performance marketing. I was doing really cool like brand campaigns, spending a lot of money, not thinking about what the results were. But I really wanted to leave the agency.
That sounds nice. That sounds really nice.
It was so nice. It was so nice. Sorry, clients, also, if you're hearing me say this now. I really wanted to leave the agency. And I probably for a year, so 4 years into the job, I was like, I gotta leave. I gotta do something else. I really want to go to the brand side. I probably applied to 100 jobs. I mean, and I got rejected everywhere. I think that part of it is hard to go from the agency to the brand side. What I was doing was pretty like niche, like sports marketing, and I was trying to get out of that. And I remember being so discouraged, talking to my family of like, should I be going back to school to get an MBA? Am I ever going to be able to leave this world? Just kept pushing. I persevered. I kept applying, kept networking. And truly a year later, I got a job at MasterCard. And, you're still like, huh, but like, that's not what I'm talking about, Meredith. What was so interesting at MasterCard is I was on their marketing team and still kind of sports related. They do a lot of sponsorships, but everything was related to how are these campaigns driving credit card usage, credit card transactions. And I was fascinated by this world. I was like, oh, wow, like this is like what I liked in terms of finance at Georgetown, coupled with the emotional aspect of marketing. I was like, there's more to do here. And so that began to like scratch the itch of wanting to get to more of this like performance side.
Oh, that's super cool. You know what's so interesting? So my dad is an accountant. I also was in business school. I was a marketing major. I was horrible at accounting. That was probably one of my C's in college. And I end up in growth, which is kind of, it's people always ask me about it. It's like, well, it's the most analytical part of marketing, or you can, or it can be. It's the combination of analytics and creativity and analysis and all of this stuff. So it's really interesting. That resonates a lot with me. I think it'll resonate with other folks too, because it's a combination of all these things that you would learn. So that was your jumping off point. So switching gears a little bit, I'd love to know. So you talked about working at the agency, which is Edelman for folks who are listening to this. You end up at MasterCard. You end up going to Grubhub. I would love to hear a little bit about one of the challenges that you encountered kind of in the earlier days of your career that ended up being a big personal growth moment.
Early on at Grubhub, I had a manager who saw me as like, I had a lot of area to grow and help the company. He wanted me to join his team. He was ready for me to take on a role that was previously a director position that a male had in seat. So a male had the position. So he asked me to join his team. Right before I was about to sign, on the papers when they got sent to me as a senior manager, which was my title at the time.
Just to contextualize, is this switching teams within Grubhub, or is this initially when you signed on coming from MasterCard?
It was switch. It was when I was in Grubhub, it was switching like within the marketing team.
Oh, cool. And you got an official offer, like a written thing that had details on it? That's cool.
Yeah, I did. Because it was a new position, I guess. And so, I might have found out before I got the papers, might have been told live first, but I was told I was going to be getting the position as a senior manager versus filling the role it was a director at the time. And at the time, I was so upset. I thought to myself, I am not getting the title of a director because I'm a female, and this male had the role as a director level, but like I'm not seen as like the same level as him. And it really felt at the time like a sexist thing. And, I was like, should I talk to a lawyer? Like, what do I do? How can they like give a female the same responsibility, but at a lower title? Probably cried, right? You'll probably hear me say again on this podcast that I've cried because I cried a lot. Looking back on it, I still see why I thought that. But now I have hindsight to also seniority as part of the hindsight to understand that it most likely was not 100% a sexist thing, that it's also just in business, right? A lot of times you move roles and then you get promoted into the role, right? Was that clearly communicated to me? No. Were my reaction fair at the time? Yes. But I think now in hindsight, I know that moment at the time that felt like the end of the world, I know was not the end of the world. And it's all been okay since then.
Thank you for sharing. That sounds shitty. And I think that there's probably a lot of folks listening that have had different but parallel situations, whether it's going to apply for a new job and having the people kind of switch the title at the end, or switch the comp at the end, or something about it wasn't what you had discussed. And so I think this is something that unfortunately happens in different ways. For you personally, I just want to contextualize what happened. So you're working at Grubhub, you get tapped for this new opportunity. Is this part of like a review cycle? Is this just totally happen chance? Like, can you just kind of contextualize how?
Yeah, it was out of the blue. It came up that this person wanted me on his team, his or her team. And I knew what the position was because somebody had the position. When it was first presented to me, it was not presented like, oh, and you will do it at this lower title than what the current person is doing it at.
And so you had just hoped, assumed that it would be coming in at the next level, because why would they ask you to take on a growth opportunity and not give you a title to be compensated in addition to, taking on the additional responsibility? So obviously upset about that. Yeah. And so with the benefit of time and distance, do you think sexism played a part in it? Like, as you think about it now, objectively?
Objectively, no, that was not the main reason for it. Since then, I was the first person at that time to have moved teams into a higher position. And so there was no precedent at the time that, okay, if you move teams, then it's going to be at the current level and then you can get promoted into it. So there wasn't anybody before me. Since I did that, a lot of people had a similar situation where they changed teams. It was a higher level that they were going to do, but they had to change at their current level and then grow into it. I set the precedent. They said for these other people that Meredith is the example. When you change teams, you change at the current level and then you get promoted into it. So because there were then a standard set And it wasn't, I know now because Meredith was a female, like I know it wasn't a gender thing alone. Subconsciously, I do think like if the first person to do this was a male, would it have been the same situation? I can't help but think that still, but I can't point blame that it was 100% like sexism.
And so knowing what you know now, especially with you kind of setting the precedent, if you could go back in time, would you have done anything differently?
Just not probably not cried, and I'd have been so upset. No, because what I think is like everybody needs to do is stand up for themselves, right? Like I made it very clear that I was not happy. I made it very clear that like these were my expectations in a very professional way. And I think that's the right thing to do.
And so what happens after this for you at Grubhub?
Yeah, I do the job and I do a kick-ass job because I always will. And like in 6 months, as I was promised, I got the promotion into the title. And so it's a matter of like, I really trusted my manager. And I think that's so important. It's like, you are going to have setbacks. It was not my manager who made that decision to give it to me at the title. It was like, politics, HR. And when he told me he would promote me within 6 months, I believed him and he pulled through. And so, like, find yourself. I know you aren't asking for this advice right now, but like, find yourself and like work with people who you really trust because that makes all these bad situations so much better.
I love that. No, I was just about to ask what your advice would be to someone who finds themselves in this situation. So you kind of answered it proactively.
Great.
And now you're in leadership roles and you have been for a while. Has this experience influenced the way that you have career conversations with your team?
Yes. First of all, like, I love coaching and I love managing because I've been in so many bad situations that I do my best, right, to have my team like not leave meetings feeling shitty, right? Because like that's how I felt like leaving that situation where I wasn't clear up front on what the title was. So it does. I think for me, I really lead with empathy. How would this feel if I am a, senior associate manager on Meredith's team? I'm hustling, right? I'm working long ass hours. So I really, really, really try to lead, understanding like what it's like to be in their shoes and also like, how do they feel? Because like when I'm talking to them and at the end of the meeting, right, at the end of a conversation, like I don't want them leaving feeling bad, like wanting to cry, right? There's some things that like I can't control, but I can control how I present myself to my team.
Have there been any resources that have helped you to tune in to their feelings and emotions? Because I think that there's a lot of folks who subconsciously probably don't create a culture where people feel comfortable to be vulnerable. So I'm curious if there's any tools that you found along the way that have been helpful.
Yeah, so I was lucky where I got professional managerial experience. So I've had an executive coach or two over the years. And so I'm not saying everybody here can afford that, but I do know a lot of people look for coaches, whether it's like executive level or whatever level you're at. And I think a coach is an incredible resource because it gives you, like, it's somebody in your corner, right? Who's going to give you feedback beyond just a twice a year review from your manager. And so that has been very helpful for me to figure out how to lead because, like, I talked at the beginning how I'm compassionate, I'm empathetic, but I also used to not be very nice all the time as well. During my Grubhub years where I accelerated my career, it was, a fast growing company at the time. I wanted to be a part of that growth. And I think there were situations sometimes where to get ahead, I might have put others down. And so like through coaching, right, I've learned about those negative traits that I had. And if it's like made me much more aware, am I perfect? No. But it's the coach, the resource that has helped me see like where I need to develop to be a better like coworker, manager person.
And where did the awareness come from to even get a coach? Like, does that come from your sports background? Because I feel like a lot of people who work in tech have no idea that there's even a community of coaches that could support someone like them.
Yeah, I didn't know either. And honestly, let's talk about again, like having a good manager, right? Having somebody who like you really trust and is there for you. It was my manager who suggested it and got the company to pay for it. So I was very lucky in that regard that it was sponsored with the company. And, since then, I would say like I haven't paid for any coaches myself, but I have really good mentors now where I don't necessarily need that. I think it would always benefit, but like a mentor can also serve like a really similar purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. So we talked a little bit about getting some feedback on this situation, kind of working with a coach, getting some feedback from them. I'm curious to elaborate on this feedback concept and explore some tough feedback that shook you a little bit the first time you heard it, whether formalized in a 360 review or more informal conversations with your manager or with a coach or anybody else.
If we bring up the like gender topic again in the workplace, I got feedback that I speak with. I have like an upspeak, and now I'm going to be self-conscious of it.
I was going to say you haven't
Yeah.
up until, at least I haven't noticed it if you have.
So the idea here is that you have a sentence and at the end it sounds like a question, basically. And, it sounds like you aren't as secure, as confident when you're speaking if you speak like this.
Who gave you the feedback? Was it a man or a woman?
It was a man. It was a man.
Do you think that changed? Like, do you think it's any different if a woman tells you versus a man?
At the time, yes, I do think. And once again, it felt like I was in a very male dominated, working with a ton of males, right? And I was a male manager. And so the feedback to me was not about how I spoke, but more so speak like us and be like us. And that's how I interpreted the feedback, right? And almost like I took it to the level of like, not that I really wear lipstick, but like, should I not wear lipstick, right? Like, should I like become like Elizabeth Barrows and like pull back my hair and wear a turtleneck, right? And sound like a man. And so that's how I interpreted it. And it was very hard at the time because getting that feedback made me more self-conscious. As you even heard me when I began to talk about the feedback again, it like pulled me back to that place. And so every time I talked, I got nervous.
Yeah, I would imagine that would be a weight, right? Because it's not a feedback on something you did or a decision that you made that if you had different information, you could have done differently. It's sort of feedback about who you are as a person, right? That to me feels like a different level of intensity.
Exactly.
And I asked you who gave you the feedback, man or woman, because I have a good friend of mine who's a woman who also got this feedback. And so I remember her confiding in me and sharing how difficult it was and how it was something that had plagued her in her career and how she thought it had impacted her career opportunities. And so I never said anything to her. To be honest, it wasn't something that was important to me or something I guess I really noticed all that much. But she had shared with me how she had gotten that feedback from men. And I was curious if you had as well.
Yeah. I'll say that it's one thing to give feedback as like a manager, not a coach, but it's another thing then to help your team. And this is where like as a manager now, I'm so aware that if I'm going to give feedback, it's not for my team alone to go run with it. It's if your feedback is like, you need to improve your Excel skills, let's sit down and like figure out like, is there somebody at the company who you should be shadowing a little bit more, right? Like, let me help you get there. And so I was lucky, right? Where the person who gave me this feedback also got me another coach. So this was a different time. I've had an executive coach and then I had a public speaking coach as well. And I so appreciate that because, looking back, whether it was like how I spoke or not, like everybody can improve their public speaking skills. And so, yes, giving somebody that feedback might be hard, but how incredible that then I got the resources to improve. And like, here I am now, like talking to you, clearly totally confident being here because once again, I surrounded myself with people who helped to lift me up.
Yeah. In that moment, did you say anything back? Like, what was your reaction when you got this feedback?
Yeah, I probably didn't say anything back right away, but I probably went home and cried. It's like, you don't like the way I speak? How do I change this? And like, do I sound stupid? Have I always sounded stupid? Like, do I sound ditzy? And so it made me sad, I think, very sad that it's like you said, it's not something like do more A/B testing and like accelerate your testing roadmap. Sure. But like, how do I fundamentally change who I am? It felt like.
This episode is brought to you by Navattic. We're seeing the next phase of product-led growth emerge right now. The first phase of PLG was all about using your product as a go-to-market tool. Basically creating free plans, free trials, or reverse free trials, getting new accounts to sign up, and then layering in retention and upgrade programs. It was a solid playbook. The only challenge is that the product value is hidden behind your sign-up form, which means that most of your visitors never get to see it. The next phase of PLG is all about leading with product value, creating interactive product demos, embedding them on your website, and letting people play with them, click around, and see the value before signing up. This engages way more people, which means more experience that value, more convert to your paid plans, and more become brand advocates. If you're sold on the idea, but not sure where to start, check out Navattic. Their no-code editor makes it easy to create interactive demos, and they're offering a free trial exclusively for delivering value listeners. Go to Navattic.com/value and sign up for a free trial and see for yourself. This episode is presented by Appcues. If you work in product-led growth, you know how important activating and engaging new accounts is. Turning new accounts into active users is critical to your success in a PLG environment, and typically why activated accounts is a North Star metric for growth teams. It's why my team spent years focused on improving our new user onboarding experience during my time at Wistia and at Postscript. And that's why I'm so excited that Appcues is sponsoring the show. They're just as passionate about helping product-led companies fix their onboarding and their retention as I am. They're the leading product onboarding and adoption platform for web and mobile apps, and they've helped over 1,500 SaaS orgs create exceptional onboarding experiences that convert new users into power users and brand advocates. So if you're looking for help activating more new accounts, head to appcues.com/value. They have a free new user onboarding audit, which is done by Ramli John. He literally wrote the book on new user onboarding, and he's a close personal friend of mine. For help, head to appcues.com/value. What advice would you want someone to hear who's listening to this that maybe speaks that way with how did you describe it? With an upwards inflection? Is that how you?
Yeah, exactly. So the advice I got was to speak more, to do more panels, like public speaking events wherever you can, to get that practice. So like outside of like if you can get a coach or not, go and talk more and record yourself and then listen to it would be my advice. That's why I still do things like this.
I love that. And that's probably good advice for anybody trying to improve their speaking generally. I always record, well, even long before I did a podcast, when I'd ever have to do like a show and tell meeting or a presentation in front of the company, I'd always record. I'd usually record it beforehand in practice and then record it live and watch it back. It's always painful, regardless of inflection and intonation. But that's great advice. In your career, I would imagine you've probably encountered other people who have spoken with the same inflection. Have you ever given this feedback to someone else?
I actually haven't, because even if I've noticed it, and I'm just really thinking about it as I answer the question, like it's never bothered me enough. I've never noticed it enough to be like, you need a change. The advice I have given is for somebody who's very soft-spoken to speak up more. So something similar, right? Like if you're soft-spoken, that's fundamentally who you are. And when I give that advice, yes, that might be hard for that person to hear, but then I also had that person attend like a Toastmasters, a public speaking opportunity. And I give the feedback with context also. Like, I want you to speak up more so our CEO knows like all the great data that you analyze and knows it's coming from you. I want you to speak up more because as you advance your career, it's going to be so important just to make sure that your voice is heard at the table. So to explain the why along with that feedback.
Yeah, which is a great way to do it. I was curious. I was asking the question because as you speak about this moment in your life, you're talking about the positive outcomes from it. You end up working with a coach. And I was curious if it ends up being something that you look back on as like a win. Like, oh, I changed the way that I speak and now it's unlocked more opportunities for me. And that would influence my decision to maybe give this feedback to someone else. It sounds like no, that it hasn't made a massive impact in your career in the way that it would prompt you to say something to someone else. Is that fair? Those are my words, not yours, but.
I don't know, because I did tell that person who was soft-spoken to like speak up, right? It's more so that I haven't noticed it as much with other people is the only reason I haven't given that amount of feedback back. But it was important in my career to get that feedback because now I do think I am a better public speaker because I did get the coach, right? And I am aware that like, unfortunately, you are judged on how you present yourself. Like, I'm sorry to say that, but like in any meeting, the way you talk is going to influence the takeaway somebody is getting. So it is important to be able to be powerful in your words. So it was very important to get that feedback.
Switching gears a little bit. So I shared this with you before we started recording. I got 2 little kiddos. I've got a boy who turns 4 in like 3 weeks, and I got a 4-month-old baby girl. I took off 6 weeks over the summer, so I'm a solopreneur. I'd love to take more, but I don't get paid if I don't work, so I had to go back. And it was hard. My transition back to work was hard. Even just detangling some of my feelings and emotions was hard. And I didn't have any bosses or peers. So I know that we've chatted about this off air. You've got two little kiddos, a little bit older than mine. Can you share a little bit about what your return to work has been like?
Well, congratulations on your 4 months old. Is he or she sleeping at all through the night?
I don't want to jinx it, but we kind of have a super baby where she is sleeping the night. I know, I know. With our son, he didn't sleep the night for a long time. And when we were at our wits' end and we talked to our doctor about sleep training, like the night we geared up to do the sleep training, he slept through the night and he slept great ever since. Our daughter, she started sleeping the night probably around 3 months old. And if she wakes up, she'll wake up like one time a night, but a lot of times she'll sleep the whole night. And it's incredible. And I don't deserve it, but it's very nice.
Well, I'm very upset at you because I have a 9 month old who still is struggling to sleep. So, anyway, so yes, I have a 2.5-year-old and a 9 month old. And I was always surrounded working with working women. And I never understood at the time what it meant to be a working parent, right? Like, I shouldn't even say a working woman. I never understood at the time what it meant to be a working parent. I was that person who was sending the messages, emails at 5 a.m. and at 9 p.m. and just thinking, like, let's work around the clock. And why is this person not slacking? Or the probably wasn't Slack at the time. Why is this person not emailing me back? Right. And, during COVID, I didn't have a kid and I was still like hustling and I didn't understand what it meant. And so I'm just saying all this because it's just so hard if you don't have a kid to know what it's like to be a working parent. And nobody is to blame because you just can't know. Just like you can't know what it's like to be a parent until you're a parent. I found it really hard to go back to work. And I think it's not something that's talked about enough. Like, you're leaving the workforce for 3 to 6 months, whatever it might be, and the work's getting pushed forward. And you are just expected as a new person now, like you are a new person when you become a parent, especially for the first time, like to just go back and step in. But what happens if like your job's not the same? Like, what happens if things have changed and like what you are going back to is not what it was? What the expectations now are not the same. Do you go back? Do you choose to do something else? Right. Like, and so that is something that was really hard for me. It's something that I still like reflect a lot on. Like, what would have happened? So I have a 2.5-year-old over the last 2.5 years. If I wasn't out of the workforce for let's say like 8 months, right? Like, where would I be today? I say all this because like I want women to be able to have like more support and a dialogue, knowing that like it's not easy. And a lot of people go through what I go through where like what they left is not the same as what they came back to.
On your first point, in just that you can't understand what it's like to be a parent until you are one, what you're talking about there is managing folks on your team or maybe peers who are around you who were parents and just not knowing and understanding what their life was like and how they probably were struggling silently to really balance. That's what you're getting at a little bit here?
Yeah, definitely. And even like more senior people, right? Who like you're the leader. And why aren't you sending a clearer Q4 board kickoff email? Like, or why didn't you send it today to give us a full week? Now you're only giving us like 4 days. Like, you should have like worked longer to like get it out earlier. That's not an actual example, right? But it's just the whole idea. Like, even for senior people, like, why aren't you hustling as much when like they are constrained and like they have to set more boundaries than you have to if like you don't have kids?
Yeah. I always think about there's this woman who was on my team for a few years, and she had twins that were, I think, 4. And there was one day where she had a huge presentation. I woke up nervous for her. It was like a big presentation to all the execs, not a make or break, but a very big moment for her. And I remember I saw her that morning and I was like, hey, great day today. How you feeling? You ready to roll? And she was like, you know what? My daughter had a bad morning. I didn't give her a popsicle for breakfast and she pooped on the floor. And she's potty trained. She knew not to poop on the floor. She did it out of spite. And then she stepped in it and she stomped it all over the rug in her room. And she said, we had a whole family crisis about the poop situation. And she said, that was my morning, Andrew. She said, I don't care about the meeting. Whatever happens in it is going to be way easier than how my day has gone so far. And when she said that, I was like, oh, I have no idea what your life is like.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
And so what do you want women to take away or hear who are listening to this, right? So we're talking about the challenges of both being a parent, but certainly returning to work and having things change and change around you and feeling nervous and scared. What do you want them to hear and to take away?
Yeah. One, they're not alone. And two, that there's always resources. Find yourself a community, whether it's like you've heard this, you're going through it, reach out to me on LinkedIn. I've talked to so many other women who are in who are in a similar situation. And I love to jump on a 30-minute call just to be like, let's just talk this out, right? So one, you're not alone, and two, find resources, talk to somebody. Another working parent, right? Even if that person had a fine time going back to work, right? Which is great. That does happen a lot. I'm not trying to be negative Nancy here, but that person also probably knows somebody who struggled to go back and can connect you to somebody, right? Like power in numbers, use your community.
Yeah. You also talked a little bit, we were just talking about the way that you manage and how that evolves. Can you elaborate a little bit more about how your personal management style has changed for other working parents?
Well, for the working parents and overall, I would say like, first of all, I still work late at night sometimes and so much more conscious of how disruptive like getting a slap at 9 p.m. might be, right? And that anxiety that might cost somebody, whether or not you have a kid, right? Like, yes, people should be able to work whenever they want, but I don't have to slack you at 9 p.m. I can do a delayed send. So I'm much more mindful of like working hours and being very trying to keep all my communication around that. The other side of it is like for working parents, I can just be much more like empathetic, right? Yes, like you have to go take your kid to get a flu shot tomorrow, like fine. But I think the bigger impact for me has been how am I now a better manager for all my employees because I want to be more mindful of boundaries.
Right. And everyone's got something, right? So even if you don't have a family, you've got a pet and they get sick, or you've got a parent or a relative or I don't know, an issue with your car or whatever. Everybody's got something.
Yeah, I think today might be like Mental Health Awareness Day, the day that we're recording this. I've seen some Instagram ads, but like just your mental health, right? Like I want you to be really productive during the workday. And to me, that's like giving you also a time to like decompress as well.
So it's interesting. You talked about the anxiety that folks might feel during the late night slack. I look at someone like you, Zola, Parsley Health, Grubhub, Masterclass, Edelman, like you're a badass. And so I would think someone like you probably never feels anxious at all. Could you share a time where maybe you have felt a little bit of anxiety or struggled with a little bit of imposter syndrome along the way?
Yeah. So I post it. This is protect my peace, and it sits on my desk, my monitor, right? So like, yes, I get anxious, but like, I don't know. Sorry if this sounds woo woo, but I want to also like protect my peace.
What does that mean to you? Like, what is your definition of protect my peace?
Yeah, like I have this like boundary around me, right? Where like you can come in and out of it, but ultimately like, and I will like give you energy. I can't believe how woo I sound right now, but I'll like give you energy to, do my job. But if it's going to affect me outside of like 9 to 5, like I need to protect that. Like I need to shield it. And so that's how like I define it because I am like a very like anxious person.
Yeah. And that makes sense to me. It's not too woo woo. I love that stuff. My mom is an executive coach. I've been doing woo woo since I was like 4 years old. I'm into all of it. And I just had, who was it on the show? I had Emma Stratton. She has a company called Punchy, which is a SaaS messaging tool or a SaaS messaging agency. She just wrote a book called Make It Punchy. Anyways, she was telling me all about doing hypnotherapy, chakra therapy. She worked with an energy healer to help her work through stuff. So I love it all. And you got to use the tools that are available to help you when you need it, right? We all need stuff.
I believe in it all. Like taking a breath, and we can talk about time where like I've been anxious and then I can trickle back to this. But like, I remember one time I had a job where the CFO literally yelled at me and it's like open floor plan situation. And yeah, got yelled at where I was like asked like, do you even know what you're fucking, sorry, you can blurt that. Do you even know
you can swear. This is like, we're just like real people here. You can swear. It's all good.
Do you even know what you're effing doing, Meredith? Right? Like yelled at by the CFO.
You got yelled at like that?
Oh yeah. Yeah. And in an open floor plan space, right? Where like other people can hear it. So you're asking about time I was anxious. If your CFO is yelling at you, you're pretty anxious afterwards. And that was a while ago. And I would say something I'm so happy I have in my tool belt now is that I know so much better how to manage stress and anxiety at work. Like now we go back to like, protecting my peace, but like breathing, like just taking a moment, go outside. You have another meeting after you get yelled at like that? Don't go to the meeting. You aren't going to be a good, like productive in that meeting. Like somebody will understand later. You can tell your manager later, like what happened, right? Go on a walk, get fresh air, take a breath. If you're an anxious person, like don't roll out of bed and start your work day. Like you need to know what tools you have to like show up the best for yourself and others at work.
How have you learned all this? Like, have you gotten into breath work? Are you doing Wim Hof stuff? Or is this just more you just needing some space sometimes when things pop up?
Yeah, I love breath work. And so I think it's like really cool for people out there who like haven't tried it. It's I would say, I don't know, would you call it like a more intense form of meditation is the way like I look at it. If you've done like guided breath work, meditation for sure. But knowing that like meditation doesn't all look the same. Meditation could just be going on a walk, silent, and just like focusing on like relaxing and breathing and coming down a little bit. And I saw you had a reel on LinkedIn about like your day in the life. And I think at the beginning you were joking. You're like, yeah, I would love to like sauna and cold plunge in the morning. I do like probably 2 times a week before I work out. I like to. I'm like, that actually helps me so much. Like I like to meditate when I do that.
Do you have a sauna at your house, by the way?
My gym. I wish I had a sauna at my house. I keep like texting my husband. I'm like, look at this one. Do you have one?
No, but I've got my eye on it for Black Friday. I've been thinking about it a lot. My gym had one, my old gym. We moved in January. My old gym had one, and I would go in probably 4 days a week. And I mean, I joked about it in that day in the life video, but the truth is, huge impact on my physical and mental health and my sleep. I got a 4-month-old. I'm not in the sauna chapter right now, but I hope to get back to it.
Yeah, but like now that like whatever however many thousands of dollars is might be a good investment for your mental health, right?
100%.
And so reading a book for 10 minutes with coffee in the morning might be good for somebody else, right? But I don't know, it just goes back to like protecting your peace and like how do you want to feel at the end of the day? Because like a lot of people listening to this are very career driven, but like your career is not the only part of your life. Whether or not you have kids, right? Whether or not you have a pet, right? In like 15 years, I'm like, not, well, it wasn't 15 years ago, but I'm not stressed anymore about the CFO yelling at me, right? So like, why do I have to let it take up my space in the moment that and finding a ways to like allow for things to slide off quicker is so important.
I was curious, do you have other sticky notes on your computer?
I don't because like that's the most important one for me.
No, I love that. I love that there's just one and that's what it is. So you said that when I reflect back on this situation with the CFO, I'm not stressed on it anymore. There's a different version of this story. I could talk to someone else where the same thing could happen and they could hold on to that moment. They could take it with them. It might become something that is a weight on their shoulders that they have a hard time putting down. Why do you think you've been able to put it down and it's just a speed bump in your journey and not a major piece?
Unfortunately, because I've had other hardships since that moment. And so like what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And I really do believe that. And I also like know now with time that like the person respected me, but like people get stressed. And I'm able to look back at the moment and know like not everybody's going to always show up as their best selves. I think that like really helps. Like when something bad happens to me now, also, like it's not on me. It's also like that other person isn't showing up as their best self.
Is that something that you worked on with a coach? That specific situation?
Probably therapy.
And there's like a fine line there depending on who your coach is sometimes.
Yeah, I think so. And I coach and I've coached and, I've had people that I coach like want to use me as a therapist. And I'm happy to have those conversations. But I do think that therapy is different. I think that like that's, has really helped outside of coaching. I also think just getting older, unfortunately, right? Like you just kind of care less. Like care less about other people being rude. You're like, okay, that's your problem.
Yeah. It took me a long time. That was something that I worked on with a coach, which is why I asked you that question. I remember I had a really challenging situation with someone who was around me at the office. I remember telling my coach about it. And one of the strategies that they used to help me get a little bit of distance was they asked me to write down 10 things that might be going on in that person's life that might influence a situation that I hadn't thought about. And I was like, that sounds dumb. That was my initial response. And then I did the activity. And the first 3 things are sort of the silly things that are right in front of you. And then when you kind of write down maybe 5, 7, 10 things that could be going on, one of those makes you pause and think, oh, I kind of feel bad for them if this was going on. And geez, yeah, if that was going on and that's how it came out, like I'm just worried about them. And it just changes the way that you can get past an existing situation. And it sounds like you have a similar tool. You just learned it from a different place.
Exactly.
So what are the other things you mentioned? A little bit of breath work, a walk outside. What are the other things that you do if you're having a bad day or if someone's listening to this and they're having a bad day? How do they reset?
Yeah. I mean, if you do have a kid, I hug my kid, I play with my kid, right? Like from 4:30 to 7:30, that time, it's like when I had a bad day the other week, right? Like I'm not going to have a takeover when I'm with my kid. I want to be present. And to me, that time is like so sacred. And like one of the best things about being a parent is you get to be a child again. Right. So after work, when I had that stressful situation, let's go for a bike ride with my 2.5-year-old around the block. Let's go like down the slides together and race down the slide. Like, what is more therapeutic than that? So that's like a huge thing for me. It's definitely like disassociating and like, being present with my family. So like, and if you don't have a kid, that playtime for you might be like playing pickleball like everybody's doing right now. It's like, what is that like joy that you can find that's gonna get your mind off of the negative?
And you mentioned breath work a few minutes back. If someone was interested in taking the first step into exploring breath work, what would you advise them? What would be the first step to that?
Yeah, I mean, you could like try like traditional meditation, right? That's like more straightforward. I honestly do a lot of meditation sometimes, just like even the other day I was driving to the gym and I was kind of anxious. And I looked on Spotify for like driving meditation and there was a great thing. So like if you have Spotify, you can also like just look there. Beyond that, if you just look for like a guided breath work near you and learn like finding somebody, a space to go to that's going to do an hour, 2 hour session with you, I think that is, the best way to do it. Find somebody who will like guide you through it to start.
I wish I did that. I got very into meditation a few years ago to manage my own anxiety, and it brought me down a tunnel of all these different places and basically therapies. And so there was a Buddhist temple near me when I lived just outside of Boston that I wanted to go to that had some guided breath work. And I just never made it there. And so it was one of my regrets is I just never made it. It sounds like you did, which is awesome.
Yeah. The one thing about breath work versus meditation is I find that breath work has a longer lasting effect. That if I do it on the Sunday, I find that like I don't have to meditate for some time to like be brought down for longer.
So we've talked a lot about a lot of different situations in your career. I'm curious if you could go back in time, what is a soft skill that you wished you had worked on sooner that might have been helpful in your journey? So like for me, I spent all my time learning tactical skills. It was like any moment that I had that was downtime, I was like, well, I need to learn this and I don't know how to do this. And I'm working in PLG, but I haven't had exposure to that. And so I was just voracious. It was like I would watch YouTube videos and I'd go to conferences and I'd seek out certain speakers and I'd DM these random strangers and I'd ask to pick their brains. And in retrospect, once I got to a certain level, basically the job was a lot of presenting and communication and learning how to drive alignment. And I didn't work on those skills. And so when I got to the director level, I wasn't very good at it. And I wished if I could go back in time, I would have had more help and time dedicated to those other things. I was curious if there's a version of that for you.
Yeah, I think I've skewed recently so far. It's like the numbers, like you're saying, where I've lost the brand, where not in a negative, right? Because like I love where I've skewed, but like it matters so much. And like being more playful and excited on the creative side, right? Giving it that time and the love it deserves, or something I'm mindful of even now of like spending more time. And
Yeah. So to balance out a little bit. And for you, what are your career goals at this stage of your journey?
yeah, it's sort of a steady state growth. I'm not looking for any like hockey stick in terms of like my personal career right now. It's a balance, right? Where I feel so lucky in this somewhat virtual world where now like there is so much back to the office. But the fact that I'm able to work from home, be done and just go pick up my kids right away and not have to commute, I feel so grateful for. I've interviewed at places where they want me to travel 4 days every week. I'm like, I'm not going to do that, even though the pay is going to be incredible. What allows me to continue to challenge my mind, in 10, 15 years, make my kids proud, to give me the life that like I want in the future while also being present today.
Have you read the book Radical Candor?
It has. Yeah.
In it, I always think about this analogy. She talks about different people on your team. You've got rock stars and you've got superstars. Superstars want to work late and gun for promotions. Rock stars want to do great work and clock out at 5. And what I'm hearing you say is you're in a great rock star period where you got your amazing family. You want balance.
Exactly. Exactly.
So thank you for coming on, sharing your journey and exploring this stuff from a bunch of different angles. I know it's hard and hopefully not like re-traumatizing to reflect on some of these stories. For folks who are listening that want to connect with you, whether it's women who want to chat about returning to office or men that are working through things that just want a helpful and safe ear, where should they go? How can they get in touch with you?
Yeah. Like everybody probably says, LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out, Meredith Rosenbloom, if you have any questions, coaching, etc. Like I love to chat with other people.